think could be. The main lift would start about there, so we might have to dig slightly into the ground. So the station would be just above ground level over there, descending, and then a straight line straight up by the side of these trees. So really the only place where we're actually having to go through trees, other than along the track, is where the actual figure 8 crosses over, somewhere down there. But if we have a walk down here, if someone ever asked me what I do for a living, I say I design rides and attractions for theme parks. In actual fact, the term theme park is so abused, even I don't really understand what it means anymore. Once upon a time, a theme park was a themed attraction. In other words, there was a specific theme or a group of themes where visitors could be taken on some kind of adventure on that theme. It could be the Wild West, it could be outer space or whatever. And that's really what Disneyland was all about.
Yeah, we come back towards the station.
That's right. And by then going, it doesn't matter which side of the beach tree down here we go, whichever is more convenient. Obviously, it's important that we... In Britain, we imported the term theme park, and it has become any kind of amusement park, preferably inland, in other words, away from the sea. Why, I don't know. With a clean-cut image where you pay one price for your admission and then everything is free. And that is what is generally accepted as a theme park. And it really is a nonsense, because really a theme park is a place of themed entertainment.
To my mind, it's an entertainment park that has a pay one price policy. And I think if you go into it any deeper than that, it becomes so confusing. And you get parks that you would regard as having no connection with theming whatsoever, calling themselves theme parks. So I prefer to keep it very simple.
At Alton Towers, we are planning a major development that is going to be a very large roller coaster type ride. We've thought about it long and hard. So I'm not saying that this is going to be the biggest in the world, or the highest in the world, or the fastest in the world, because that is not important as far as I'm concerned. We are not on ego trips. My basic objective is to give people fun. And those people that set out to build the highest, the longest, the fastest, or whatever, end up probably with a very dull ride. And of course, next year, someone comes along and tops them. And this is what has happened in the States. All they're concerned about is superlatives. What I set out to do is building the ultimate in terms of fun, in terms of the best. And if that means it's not quite as high as the next person's, or not quite as fast, so be it. But at least I've got all the fun elements without the restraints of thinking, oh, I've got to make it another 20 metres long in order to get it in the record book.
What's happening here is really what happened in America 25 years ago. And we followed, done things slightly differently, but the route is the same, and I think the philosophy is the same. Fun fairs have got rather a discredited image. Unfair in some respects, but a discredited image. And people now are looking for a day's entertainment rather than just a couple of hours or an evening. And therefore, the opportunity to visit places that have been well thought out, well done, well landscaped, well constructed, safe, good, wholesome environments, and exciting, has perhaps hastened more recently with the decline in Alton Towers.
So this is one option we've got for a twin-track wooden racing coaster. The station is here with a lift up in this direction to a high point, turning around, and the first big drop will be a double up, double down dip, which means it's not just a straightforward one of those, but it's a one of them with a one of them on the way up, which then comes around here, and then unlike most roller coasters where it's getting progressively lower and lower to the ground and getting less and less thrilling, the land falls away here, which means that because the ground is dropping as you're dropping, so it means we can keep the relative height. We can keep the big dips going all the way round and take it back with a series of camelback humps round and back into the station there. I had this aunt and uncle, Uncle Tommy and Auntie Reenie, who had an act called Vadia and Dorinova and the Dive of Death. And this basically consisted of Uncle Tommy jumping from one of the stage boxes onto Auntie Reenie's shoulders. Now, after you've been doing this for a few years, you begin to get a bit worn into the ground. And they decided that when they were in there sort of getting on a bit, that they wanted to do something slightly less physical. And so they started an illusion act. And also, Uncle Tommy used to manufacture illusions for other magicians. And as a child, I used to go and visit them and was surrounded by all these wonderful cabinets and props and bits and pieces. And that really sparked my imagination and got my interest going in it. Now, if you want to float anything, this is the book to go for. The Encyclopedia of Suspensions and Levitations. There's some crazy ideas in here, going right back in history. Now this one, you wouldn't do it like this nowadays, but this thing comes up through a trapdoor in the stage, up the bloke's trouser leg, and supports the girl in that way. Amazing. Never do anything like that nowadays. When I was about 7 or 8, I recreated an old fairground sideshow illusion called the Spider Girl, which I saw at Battersea Fun Fair when I was a kid and absolutely blew my mind. And eventually I worked out how it operated. And I bought the bits and pieces from junk shops, and I actually built it in the garage. And my father came home from work one day to see a queue of little kids queuing up at a card table outside the garage. And the little girl next door was sat at the card table charging the kids 4pence. I'm not too sure why it was 4pence, but 4pence to go into this darkened garage where they could see this amazing spider girl, half girl, half spider. While I was working in stage management at the Theatre Royal in Windsor, getting paid very little, as stage managers used to, and still do, I hasten to add, get paid, Windsor is located more or less halfway between Pinewood Studios, where they were churning out James Bond films at the rate of about one every 18 months, and Bray Studios, where they were churning out Hammer horror films. This is in the late 60s. Hammer horror films at about one every 6 months. And I started augmenting my wages by building trick props and other bits and pieces for those studios. And in the end, I left the theatre and went into special effects full time. After the ghost train, which we called Uncle Frankenstein's Scream Machine, because we wanted to get away from the old ghost train image, we called it Uncle Frankenstein's Scream Machine. It was a big success. And there was another dark ride at Barry Island that the owners wanted, again, to give a facelift. And so I designed the Wacky Gold Mine ride. That needed a lot of animated figures. And at that particular time, the only people in the world that had really developed sophisticated animation technology was Disney. And those figures in Disneyland had a reputation for costing millions of dollars and being horrendously complicated. And I thought, well, there's got to be a way of making animated figures far more realistic than we have at present, without them costing an absolute fortune. People found the whole thing quite spooky, actually. It was actually in the living room of my flat, and it used to have a dust sheet over it when I wasn't actually operating it. And I'd whip off this dust sheet, press a button, and this thing would sing Old MacDonald's Farm or whatever. I can't remember what it used to sing there. But people's reaction was they were freaked out by this thing. And eventually the local papers got to hear about it, and then the local television, and eventually I was phoned up by the editor of Tomorrow's World, who said he'd heard about it and could he come and see it.
Take that night train to Memphis, take that night train to Memphis. Tell the engineer to pull the throttle. Keep that engine stack to smoking. I'm not kidding, I'm not joking. I'll soon be with my gal, I'm hoping. Hallelujah, hallelujah. I'll be shouting hallelujah all day. Oh, we'll have a jubilee down in Memphis, Tennessee, and I'll shout hallelujah all the day.
Well, it's time now on this special edition of Tomorrow's World to welcome a good friend of ours, Charlie Pluckett. Now, Charlie, in case you haven't realised it already, is a robot.
Now,
he was
hang on
built
a
by
second. If anyone's going to explain how I work, it's going to be me. These Tomorrow's World people can be such know-alls.
The day after the Tomorrow's World programme went out, the phone never stopped ringing. All sorts of people, household names and obscure industrial companies, all wanted the technology for very, very different reasons. In one outfit, wanted me to build a lifelike moving robot for testing incontinence wear, to see how leak-proof their incontinence wear would be. And they wanted something that could move about 24 hours a day, month in, month out, to see if it would develop any leaks.
I think the idea of animating a wax figure needs firstly to understand what a wax figure really is, albeit static. A wax figure is in many ways a three-dimensional illusion. The ability to walk all the way round and to see something that is life-size is often magical, and particularly if the person is famous for some particular reason. Now, if they're magical, then the idea of taking that realism a stage further for our public is a very attractive proposition for us.
The dilemma I was faced with after Tomorrow's World was how to exploit it, because I couldn't patent it. The thing was basically very simple, but when you patent something, immediately the specification is published and the whole world can find out how it worked. And it was only a question of just changing a few things around and everybody could have built these things. Now, all the other people that wanted to buy it just wanted to buy it, and that was it. I'd have lost control. Whereas Madame Tussaud approached me, and they said, look, we would like to work with you on this, to use our abilities as sculptors and as artists, and bring in engineers if necessary, because I'm no engineer, of course, to get this thing to a level of sophistication where we can present this to our visitors. A robotic movement is like that, whereas a human doesn't move that way. A human movement moves smoothly from rest up to a predetermined speed, and then it slows back down again to stop. And all our movements flow. A nod of the head, it's not that, but it's a smooth, ramped movement. And what I was able to achieve in a very reliable and simple manner was ramped movement. And this then was just the starting point for a tremendous program of development that Madame Tussauds, and with myself supervising what was going on, undertook before anybody outside the organisation knew what we were doing.
The first animated figures we put on show to the public was at our Royalty and Empire exhibition in Windsor in 1983. We did a lot of research very quickly to find out what the response was. We were most encouraged. We were able to immediately see some people leaving thinking the only way we'd actually carried it off was to use real actors. And that was the ultimate compliment in telling us that we brought off an illusion. Since that original John Wardley prototype, as it were, we've moved on in a whole host of ways. We've got to understand different forms of technology in animation that allow us to do different things. Pneumatics as well as hydraulic controls and drives are important to us, different forms of springing. There is a different series of controls required for something that's a very precise movement and something that is a very slow flowing movement. We've also developed electronics and the way we actually have control systems electronically for those drives and the power. We've even developed acrylic eyes and the way we control those. The cost of an animated figure for us is something that firstly presents us with a challenge in truly identifying what it is, because every time we make one, it's unique, and therefore we need to set about a different puzzle. But anything between £30,000 to £60,000 a figure is certainly not out of the question in terms of taking on the challenge of getting Phil Collins to play the drums as we do at Rock Circus, or getting Charles Dickens to read one of his books.